Hey everyone, and welcome to the Marvel Snap Decks of the Week, the weekly series where I showcase the top 10 best decks in Marvel Snap. Reporting live from PAX East Boston. In our hotel room here, I know it's a little scuffed. I'm literally holding my microphone with my hand. But you know what? Who cares? You're not here for the microphone. You're here for the decks. So let's get into them, starting with our top 10. Now we're going to start with Cannonball here, a 53% win rate at a 0.26 cube rate. Honestly, not the best, but if you're looking to get the weekend mission done, this is currently one of the top versions of Cannonball. I believe this deck originated from Lambie, who's the first one to use Dr. Octopus to try to generate some clogging, so to speak, to kind of maximize the Cannonball effect. Cannonball as a whole has underperformed, but if you're looking to get the weekend mission done, this is going to be the one you're going to want to turn to. We go to number 10 here, and number 10 is going to be New Zoo. Now, this deck continues to be relatively impressive. It has a 54% win rate, but a very, very strong cube rate at 0.37, one of the higher ones of the week. I like the deck a lot. It has a lot of value-generating cards, like, of course, the new Ant-Man. You have the Dazzler as well, Cull Obsidian, and Alioth to close out the initiative-based win. With a deck like this, you're often holding initiative, attacking 3 lanes at once, which makes Alioth a very natural turn 6 play. Ultimately, Mockingbird also gives you the verticality you need to kind of attack, the discard style decks and the now nerfed Thanos decks as well. So anytime you're seeing those top archetypes lose a little points of power, as in the Apocalypse nerf and the change to Thanos is Mind Stone, of course, what you're seeing is an opportunity for decks like this to surpass their power ever so slightly. So the high cube rate does not surprise me, because as you see a little bit off discard in that 2 power on Apocalypse and a little bit off of Thanos' viability, you get more breathing room for a deck like this. Okay, so pretty neat. Number 9. We go to number 8 here, and it's Helicarrier Discard. Now, what's interesting is last week this deck outperformed the other version of Discard. This week it's the opposite. Helicarrier is still doing pretty good. This does feature the Apocalypse as well. This particular version obviously has the Collector in addition to Morbius. Ultimately, just a strong deck. I mean, Discard is still very strong, despite the 2 power nerf to Apocalypse. Still a relatively reliable archetype that you can turn to get some cubes. A 55% win rate and a 0.29 cube rate, which is relatively good. We like to be above 30 cube rate if we can, but ultimately still a strong win rate. Now here we go to number 7, and this is a new emerging deck, and it's C5. Now this is actually pretty exciting because C5 is one of those decks that used to be really fun, especially when Miss Marvel was a 5 power card herself. Now we have Ant-Man that'll get to 5, Medusa that gets to 5, and Zabu for all the additional value cards at 4, including the newly buffed Miss Marvel, which is a 4/5 in and of itself. You'll note that you'll note that Adam Warlock does not make this deck. I mean, Nick Fury doesn't either, I guess, but ultimately I do think that C5 is a fun deck. The low cube rate will be indicative of how its competitive nature is not quite there, but anytime Cerebro is at least semi-viable in the meta, I think it's a fun time for everybody. So C5 making strides, coming in at number 7. At number 6, it's nice to see Patriot making a legitimate comeback, and I think a big part of this is the strength of Mockingbird. Now, Thanos was where Mockingbird happened to be the strongest. What I will say, though, is that it's really nice to see Mockingbird improving other archetypes like the Zoo archetype we talked about prior, and of course this Patriot archetype. If we could somehow reduce its viability in Thanos, I think Thanos would kind of not be quite as effective. But Mockingbird in and of itself is elevating a couple of the archetypes, and this is a great example of that. The cube rate is not quite where we want it to be. I think that's because we have a lot of, I don't want to say power creep, but there's just so much power in Snap right now, even the blob meta we had even prior to that nerf. You're looking at cards that the +2 power, even if you play Mystique in a deck like this, +4 power across the board, isn't quite enough, right? So it's a bit of a verticality issue with Patriot. Mockingbird does help correct it slightly, but ultimately 56% win rate, it's better than Patriot has been in some time. Now, this is one of my absolute favorite decks in the meta. I'm actually surprised to see it running a relatively low cube rate at 0.29. My personal version cuts Jeff and runs Daredevil, but ultimately it's a Selene-based disruption deck using the Goblins and Galactus, and I actually really like this deck a lot. This is one of my favorite. I think that the Annihilus shell is probably the most reliable shell in Marvel Snap right now. I mean, Thanos is still incredible, but you're seeing points of power being taken off Thanos, the viability with the change with the Mind Stone, taking power off of Thanos. So Galactus and Annihilus do fit together very naturally, and I do think that the Annihilus base package is probably being slept on as a whole, and I do think it's one of the best in the game. So ultimately, one of my favorite decks in the meta still is this Annihilus base Galactus deck, and it comes in at number 5. Number 4, Apocalypse discard. It's as I said mentioned prior, you have the Apocalypse discard and the Helicarrier discard, and they kind of flip-flop a little bit. I mean, let's be honest, the margins are pretty thin, but that's what's good about a card game like this, right? You have thin margins, thin percentage changes, and it makes a difference in the meta. And what we have here is a 57% win rate, a relatively low cube rate at 0.25, but a good deck. Honestly, it's a good deck, and I think that, if you're interested in playing discard, you can still confidently play this because it's just good. And Corvus Glaive, Proxima, Dracula, Apocalypse, even with the change to Apocalypse, Dracula's still getting big. You're still discarding cards. The deck still functions. Just a little weaker than it was before. As we move into our top 3, Phoenix Force is having a massive resurgence, a 58% win rate, a 0.46 cube rate. It's awesome. It's really awesome. The Phoenix Force time has now officially arrived. And I think that part of the reason why you're seeing the improvement in the win rate and the cube rate is I think that more people are starting to talk about Phoenix Force being legit. More people are putting in the time to learn Phoenix Force proper. And now you're seeing that reflect, right? You're seeing that reflect in kind of its cube equity and its win percentage. Still a difficult deck to pilot. It's going to take some practice. So if you see this deck, you're like, I'm going to try some Phoenix Force. You got to give it like 20, 30 games. I'm serious. Don't look at your ranks, just play to learn, because this is one of those decks that has very nuanced snap conditions. Retreat conditions are a little more obvious, but I think that you need to put the effort into learning the true interactions with this deck. Something that I'm still working on myself, right? Like I really like the deck, but like I'm still learning Phoenix Force because I do think it's one of the more complex archetypes to really play at a high level, right? So I don't want to discourage you, but at the same time, if you're going to play Phoenix Force because it's kind of like becoming hot, I think it's really important that you commit some energy to really learning the ins and outs of the deck before you write it off, okay? Because I think it'll be frustrating for some people to pick up for the first time. Going to number 2, it's still Thanos. Very strong, still at a 58% win rate and a 0.47 cube rate. I mean, if you think about the cube rate, that's like double like the Patriot list, double some of the others we talked about earlier, right? It's just the stats don't lie. The deck is still phenomenal. And despite the change to Psylocke, which was a significant change, and obviously Mindstone, which is a massive change, the deck still just does work. I mean, if you think about it, Mockingbird is still damn good. Cull Obsidian is basically amazing power, and you have the blob verticality too. So this deck just has so many different tools that even with all the nerfs that are happening, it's still performing exceptionally well, coming in at number 2. Our number 1 deck of the week, I can believe it, it's Destroy. Destroy seemed like it was completely out of the meta, completely irrelevant over the last couple weeks. And then now with the kind of changes that we see in the OTA and some of the kind of, just the meta shifting, it's running a 58% win rate and a 0.48 cube rate. Now, this was a surprise to me. This is a massive change from where it was in the past couple of weeks. Destroy's certainly back, and this is currently the highest performing version of Destroy. There was a number of different variations of Destroy that were doing well. This was the highest cube rate, the highest win rate version, and overall statistically the one that's leading the charge. So if you want to play some Destroy, apparently it's back. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. If you happen to find yourself in Boston at PAX East, definitely come say hi. I'd love to see you, and we'll see you in that next Marvel Snap video.